TV's W5. Wounded warriors, defiant, determined, and unbreakable.
As soon as you're broken, people treat you soft.
Haunted by memories of war.
This was horrible.
Now inspired by a light of hope.
What an honor.
And given a new lease on life.
This is where I realized that I was not alone.
Kevin Newman with a W5 special presentation.
For many of them, their spirits have been harmed too.
Brave soldiers return to places of healing.
I feel like I'm back where I should be.
Where hope and a better future arise.
I've always tried not to dwell on the past and just focus on the future.
He's definitely an inspiration to other members.
This is the new battle for Canada's heroes.
This is the big show.
This is the Invictus Games.
You'll start doing things that you never thought were possible.
Here is Kevin Newman.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of W5, profiling an elite group of international competitors. They're bonded by sport, but so much more. The risks they took in military service to their country, the war wounds they suffered, and the years of struggle to rebuild their lives. For Canada, hosting Prince Harry's Invictus Games is also the chance to salute a generation of soldiers that paid a high price for trying to bring stability to the world, particularly Afghanistan. That country continues to struggle today, as do some of the Canadians who serve there. It's hard to overstate just how important this moment is for Jody Minich. It's been a decade since he last saw this landscape out his window. The last time he flew on a military helicopter over Afghanistan, he was in crisis, fighting to stay alive.
I've been trying to get back here for 10 years, man.
It's the hardest thing for a soldier to explain, and Jody brought his brother Corey to help him through it. This hunger some soldiers have to return to a battlefield, even one that took his legs from him. Why have you always wanted to go back?
I just felt like I left unfinished business, left some pieces over there. I've always wanted to go back. I'm the person who faces fears, try to. I see obstacles as opportunities. So a chance to go back, yeah, because now I can smell that air again. I can see the sights, you know, see the people. I think this is something maybe that I need.
Back in 2006, Jody was a sniper.
Stand by. Hit.
A master corporal in the Canadian Army, deployed for his second tour in Afghanistan.
I was doing what I wanted to do, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. The good, the bad, the ugly.
As part of his duties, he was often sent out to track the Taliban as part of a small, elite force. He was on one of those missions when his life nearly ended on January 11th, 2007, when he tripped a landmine, detonating it on the ground beneath him.
It's just instantaneous. There's no warning. There was a flash like a firecracker orange, and then I was like weightless. And then I was like on the ground, and I didn't even really think anything had happened at first. And then the pain kicked in. I could just feel it going.
You were bleeding out.
Yeah. I was like, okay, if you go into shock, you're gonna die. So I just started breathing, staying calm, trying to concentrate on little things.
Well, he was talking, which is always a very good sign.
Retired Sergeant Elana Gilmour was a medic on her first tour of Afghanistan at the time.
We got him onto the stretcher, and when the ramp lowers, this like dim green light comes up. That's when I saw his face under the light.
For the first time.
Then my heart dropped. This was my buddy Jody.
Then her and a few other guys carried me to the chopper, and that was it.
Jody was flown to this military hospital in Landstuhl, Germany. His life had been saved, but his legs couldn't be. And ever since, he's relied on a wheelchair or prosthetic legs to get around. And 10 years since his injury, he's learned what it means to live in constant pain.
So you're always, on some level, in discomfort today?
Yeah, I'm in pain right now. Like, it's nonstop.
But all that pain has only slowed him down a little. W5 was alongside when Jody entered a Targa car race across Newfoundland with another wounded soldier.
We were running 12th out of 22 and second in our class.
Books to sign from Gavin's group.
His autobiography and book of other soldiers' stories are bestsellers. He's been elected a city councillor in Ottawa. Jody and Corey also competed as a team in the debut season of Amazing Race Canada.
Jody and Corey, you're team number 1.
And almost won it. Yes! But most importantly, Jody and Elana, that medic who was there the night he was wounded and nearly bled to death, have 2 daughters together, Ayla and Kira. In spite of all those triumphs here in Canada, neither has been able to leave Afghanistan behind.
I have never left Afghanistan, even still to this day, because we're always tied to it. It's still a huge part of this family. Huge. We never quite get away from it.
But Jody's hoping that by returning there, he may at long last be able to put Afghanistan in the past. He's been asked to go to the capital, Kabul, on behalf of the Invictus Games for a ceremonial lighting of the flame that will launch the final countdown to Toronto's competition.
To be the one chosen for that position, what does that mean to you?
It's serious. Like, that's a job, that's a duty. I'm not participating as an athlete, but to be trusted with that symbol is, I'm not good enough for that job, but I'll do my best.
The Toronto Games are going to be the biggest and best Invictus Games yet.
Invictus, which is Latin for unconquered, is the inspiration of His Royal Highness Prince Harry. A former soldier himself, he served 2 brief tours in Afghanistan as a helicopter pilot and gunner.
It took a prince going to war and seeing what happened to his men to spark the drive to make it happen.
For the wounded, their injuries can isolate them. The games are a chance to feel vital, perhaps even restored again. And for many, it's a way to recreate the strong bond of military service. In Canada, 550 competitors from 17 countries will share those feelings. And for Jody, Invictus is giving him a chance for closure and a chance to fulfill a decade-long desire.
This is giving me an opportunity to go to that place that will forever be, you know, part of my life. You know, and my tombstone, it'll probably say veteran of Afghanistan.
I feel like I'm back where I should be.
In spite of all that he lost here, his lower legs, his mobility, the career that brought him so much fulfillment, being back in this war-ravaged country somehow puts him at ease.
Breathe the air, breathe that, smell that. It's Afghanistan.
So when we got here, it was a nice relief, like?
Yeah, it feels good because, you know, a lot of blood and treasure here.
Is this kind of like what it was like when you were here? Like, does this remind you of when it happened and
this is
taking you back?
This is Afghanistan, man. This is it. They have a way of living that's thousands of years old, you know. I've always appreciated their, you know, their spirit.
Jody couldn't get all the way south to Kandahar on this visit. That's where Canadian soldiers endured the toughest fighting, because it's now overrun with Taliban fighters. Instead, most of his time is spent here within the safety and security of the NATO military base in Kabul.
These guys here, the convoy stuff is what I did the first time I was here. It's one of the hardest jobs, actually.
Why?
Well, because you're always going out, you never know, you're
Right.
risking your life for people you don't know and stuff. I was here in '03 and did your guys' job, so I know exactly what it's like. You guys wandered the city at all? And you've never seen the humongous river? The Kabul River? Yeah, we were just there. That's like one of my key landmarks here.
Even Kabul, relatively safe during the years Canada was part of the coalition effort, now has regular suicide bomb attacks from followers of ISIS. One of them not very far from this oasis in a corner of Kabul, the traditional palace of Afghanistan's leaders. Where on this calm summer day, international dignitaries have gathered, including the American general leading the current NATO fight in Afghanistan, John Nicholson, and Ashraf Ghani, the president of Afghanistan.
I'd like to thank the people of Canada for their remarkable comradeship and sacrifice.
They're bearing witness to the first ever Invictus torch ceremony, the symbolic first of many stops towards the Games in Toronto.
You're kindly requested to stand and welcome the Invictus Spirit Flame into the presidential palace.
Proudly carrying the flame, Major Ahmed Shah, a veteran of the Afghan National Army, an amputee, and one of 7 members of the first Afghan team to take part in the Games. For a Canadian veteran pulled from battle against his will, playing a prominent role in this ceremony is the closure of thanks he was looking for.
I want you to know it's a very humbling moment for me to be here. I came here a young man, a soldier, happy to serve, and when I left, it was on a gurney. I was wounded, but I had begun a new journey. Because of the country of Afghanistan, I met my wife. I have 2 beautiful children. I'm an elected politician. I'm an author, and I'm now an ambassador for the Invictus Games for this spirit flame that it's starting its journey here today, but I'm completing my journey, my spiritual journey with you all here, and thank you for being with me. And this is just so incredibly overwhelming for me that I'm going to stop talking before I cry. Thank you very much.
Thinking about Elana and the girls, and thinking about how much of that just wouldn't be if I hadn't stepped on that landmine 10 years ago. It was awesome, you know, so I couldn't help but get a little choked up. Thank you for your support.
It's overwhelming, I think. You know, it's humbling, and it makes me feel proud of my brother.
The Afghan experience for me has been great loss and great gain at the same time, you know. But I wouldn't trade it.
When all seemed lost,
I don't know what I'm going to be able to do for my children.
the Invictus Games offered hope.
Everybody's important on this team.
When W5 continues.
It's early June in Kingston, Ontario, and Canada's Team Invictus, all 90 competitors, all current and former members of the Canadian Armed Forces, is arriving for training camp.
It's going to be a long week, so we have to gauge ourselves.
During the next 6 days, there will be uniform fittings.
Everybody's important on this team, from staff to athletes.
And a lot of motivation from each other to draw from.
What you are doing will not only help you, it will also inspire an entire nation.
But mostly, there will be grueling workout sessions for the competitors. Sessions where sometimes broken bodies will be pushed to their limits. There are a dozen events, and Canada is competing in every one of them. Everything from archery to swimming, tennis to seated volleyball.
Yes!
But perhaps the biggest marquee event is wheelchair rugby, proudly called murder ball by those who play it.
So today we're going to focus on offense.
This sport feeds a warrior spirit.
Perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for.
Most of the players on this team are rookies who don't require a wheelchair in their day-to-day lives. they're still learning the game.
Hit as hard as you can. Hammer his chair as hard as possible. Nice.
And how to properly move around in these light and rugged wheelchairs.
2 big pushes, thrust, nice.
But that is not the case for team mentor Claude. He's a quadriplegic who has been playing wheelchair rugby for 8 years after 13 years in the forces on 2 major deployments.
Here we go, work, work, work.
As soon as you're broken, people treat you soft. They want to baby you, they want to take care of you, they want to put you in a bubble, right? Rugby takes you out of that bubble. It friggin' annihilates the bubble.
Wheelchair rugby became a key part of his physical rehabilitation after he was shot in the neck 11 years ago during an ambush while on patrol in Afghanistan.
I don't like people looking at me like I need help. I can't stand when people are, oh, you... No, I'm not. I'm a soldier. I went to Afghanistan. I've seen combat, and I'm still here.
You're tough.
That's the way life is.
Yeah. It was summer 2006, and Chris was nearing the end of a 6-month tour in Afghanistan. One typically hot day, he and his platoon were on patrol alongside members of the Afghan National Army when they started taking fire from the Taliban.
They'd set up an ambush area where they were all prepared for us to walk into because they could tell that that's the direction we were going.
So did you walk into that trap, your unit?
In a way, but in a way you kind of have to, right? Because that's the goal, is you want to clear that area. Unfortunately, I got hit.
Do you remember being hit?
Oh yeah, I originally thought that a grenade had gone off and just blowing me back. So I was trying to sit up and get my coordinates. And I couldn't move. So I was like, what the hell? And I tried yelling out, and I couldn't yell because the bullet had pierced my larynx. And I couldn't move my arms because the spinal cord was shattered, right?
This is the actual radio call reporting his injuries.
We took a laser hit from grid 311924, over.
There were some dark days, and it was made more difficult in the fact that I was pregnant.
His now wife Dina was 7 months pregnant with their first child at the time. When she heard he'd been wounded, she flew to the hospital in Landstuhl, Germany, where Chris had been airlifted to be by his side. That's a tremendous amount of stress in a very young woman.
Absolutely, I'm not going to deny that. It was a difficult time, and I hope that I paid my price in difficulty, and the rest of my life is smooth sailing, because it was a very difficult year.
I feel very blessed that she never gave up on me.
Tough.
Tough as nails. She's got to put up with me, right?
Like Chris, Blais Lapointe was in the last weeks of a 6-month tour in Afghanistan when he was wounded.
When it blew up, I thought I was dead. While I was praying at the time, I was like telling God I didn't think I was really ready.
At the time, he was the commander of a troop charged with the dangerous work of disarming and removing improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, that had been planted by the Taliban.
There's basic principles, so save lives, right? So protect anybody around, make sure that they're out of the way, nobody gets hurt.
But things did not go as planned. Early fall 2009, and Blais's team is out on what's called a dismount mission, patrolling on foot, looking for IEDs in the southern part of the country.
A couple of days into the operation, there was an IED call. We made our way there. It was my turn to act as operator. As I was downrange, looking to take care of the first IED, I noticed wires leading to another area. Started taking care of that IED, and then stepped on what was probably a PMN, an anti-personnel mine.
Fortunately for Blais, the blast did not take his life, but it did take his right foot.
I never stopped to realize what would be possible with an amputation. All of a sudden, you start questioning your identity, your ability to be who you are, right? And you don't know what the impact will be. You know, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to be able to do for my children.
Hello, hello.
Today, he's the father of 7 children.
Xavier is the eldest, and then we have Erwan, and then we have Amandine, and then Magali, Blanche, Damien, and Armand.
And believe it or not, there's an 8th on the way. And he vividly remembers lying in hospital wondering how the amputation would affect the rest of his life as a soldier and a father.
And I was feeling too weak to wheel myself around. I was sitting in this chair. The kids came to visit me. I kind of broke down on that, you know, not sure what it would mean in the long term. But it had happened, and it was done, and we were going to deal with it.
But aside from the love and support of his children, and especially his wife Madeline, Blais found the greatest source of rehabilitation was competing again.
I always enjoyed sports, but since Afghanistan, it has a huge impact. It's more of a need than a hobby, really.
And now, 8 years later, he'll be one of the busiest athletes on the Canadian team, competing in 9 events.
There's multiple events that are very similar, right? You find the similarities and you just try to fit your training to accommodate the most events at the same time. So it's really not that complex. And doesn't mean I'll be doing well in all the events either, right?
The healing power of sport. It's a core principle for any competitor training for the Invictus Games. No one more so than Claude, because for him, sports, especially wheelchair rugby, has been nothing short of transformative.
The team sports, they'll take your rehab to a whole nother level. You'll start doing things that you never thought were possible.
You were determined to be as independent as you could be, but wheelchair rugby, it seems, took you to another level. Your teammates, they motivated you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was 3 years where I could hardly get myself dressed, you know, transfer on my own. I was independent, but not fully. After I started playing rugby in 2010, I go everywhere on my own. I don't need anyone's help with anything.
It gave him that ability to feel useful and, you know, gave him that dignity and that self-respect.
Gave you back a husband in some
ways? It gave us back, yeah, a big piece of his independence, which gave me back a part of Christopher that was lost when he was injured. And that was the Christopher that I had fallen in love with.
From fighting for his life.
The outlook for me when I was here was very grim.
To being a beacon of hope.
What does that flame mean to you?
It's the light at the end of a dark tunnel.
When W5 continues.
Welcome back to this special edition of W5, and the next stop for the Invictus Flame, Germany. You know, it's almost impossible to believe it, but right next door to this charming village of Landstuhl is the largest American airbase in Europe, Ramstein. And its neighboring hospital is named after Landstuhl. It was also the first stop out of Afghanistan for Canada's wounded soldiers. It's usually pretty quiet now on the grounds of the military hospital, but Invictus will enliven it today as the Games give thanks to the doctors and nurses from NATO countries who were on duty here during the most precarious moments of Canadian soldiers' lives. Since 2001, 334 Canadian soldiers have been treated here, including Invictus athlete Claude, who barely remembers it because he was heavily sedated.
I've always tried not to dwell on the past, right, and just focus on the future and making my future good, but you have to know where you've been to know where you're going, right?
He's never known how hard the staff fought to keep him alive. So they share the admissions logs, showing when he arrived in July of 2006 and his condition then.
There's your name.
So I was here 2 days after I was shot.
Not bad.
Yeah, that fills in a huge gap for me. I really appreciate that.
Chris was airlifted here after being shot in the neck by the Taliban while on patrol in Afghanistan. His first visit back feels like his first visit ever. Wheeling through the hallways doesn't trigger any memories. Until now, everything he knew about this place was from family who had rushed here to be by his side.
Do you remember any of these sounds even?
No.
You feel anything sitting here?
No.
No?
Feels like a hospital.
Because you have no memory of this.
No, God, no. No, this was a complete coma for me. Could have never even happened.
How many days were you in jeopardy here, do you think?
I think 4 or 5.
It's probably better that you didn't remember.
Well, it isn't, because I woke up and everyone else knew I was paralyzed, but I didn't know. So I was like, what the f is going on here now?
The Taliban bullets had left him a quadriplegic at only 24 years old.
The outlook for me when I was here was very grim. I was never supposed to feed myself or push my own wheelchair or breathe on my own. That was what their prognosis was, and this is where I am, where I've just traveled to Germany by myself without an aid, without any assistance. I do all my own care. That's an incredible leap. I've done very well for myself with the little that I have, and I'm gonna continue to do well and push the limits, obviously.
One of the nurses who cared for Chris in Germany was Jim Humphreys. When he heard Chris was returning to Landstuhl, he wanted to connect.
You guys want to say hi?
Hey, Chris?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. It's giving me goosebumps just hearing your voice.
What about Chris made him stand out?
The fact that he made it out of the war zone with the extent of his injuries, you know, he's so young, and then how much longer is he gonna live? What is gonna be the quality of his life?
Obviously, I was at a crawl when you seen me, but I've kind of made this injury my bitch. I haven't slowed down at all. Got into wheelchair rugby. I've gotten married, got 2 kids, working on a 3rd one. I'm living life. I'm loving life. I'm not quitting anytime soon.
That's phenomenal. And I'm hearing the positiveness of your voice, and I could feel the joy in your voice.
As you heard his voice, what struck you?
Just the compassion, right? You could hear in his voice how he was so happy that I hadn't just fallen off the radar or given up on life, that I pushed on. I'm succeeding in life.
Succeeding in life as a father and a husband and as an athlete. He'll compete for Canada in the 100-meter wheelchair dash and wheelchair rugby at the Invictus Games. And today he has an important symbolic role to play. He's come here to the sprawling U.S. Ramstein Air Force Base. Among the planes on the tarmac is a massive C-17, which is sometimes outfitted as a hospital in the sky. One like it carried Chris from Afghanistan to Germany after being shot. But on this day, Chris is here to represent all the soldiers who were flown to Landstuhl as war wounds threatened to end their lives. Instead of carrying a wounded soldier, this C-17's precious cargo is a recovered soldier, Canadian team captain Simon Mailloux, and with him, the Invictus Spirit Flame.
It's incredible to be a part of that moment because it's so inspiring, right? Especially this early on in the relay. What an honor.
From here, they take the Flame back to the Landstuhl Hospital where they were both treated. And waiting for them there, a room full of Canadian political and U.S. military dignitaries, along with many of the hospital staff.
It is my great honor to introduce 2 Canadian heroes who were injured in Afghanistan, treated here at your hospital, and will now both be representing Team Canada at this year's Invictus Games.
This is a rare chance for a former patient to offer his appreciation for the care he received so far from home.
I just wanted to take this opportunity to really thank you guys. The service that you provide here is second to none, not only for the individual that's been injured, but to our families as well. I mean, it was absolutely incredible, and it's heartwarming. Yeah, just no real words for it.
What does that flame mean to you?
To me, the flame is a symbol. It's the light at the end of a dark tunnel that athletes have transitioned through. We've all had to lose something to be part of the Invictus Games. So we start off in a very dark tunnel in a very dark place, and we're working towards this light. And the spirit flame is now our light at the end of our tunnel, signifying that we've made it. We're dealing with our new normal.
Lost friends.
Officers, to our fallen comrades, salute!
Honored through competition.
To be asked to represent Canada, to me, was like unbelievable.
When W5 continues.
As many Canadian soldiers will tell you, repairing the physical damage of bullets and landmines and bombs, it's only part of their healing, because for many of them, their spirits have been harmed too. A major study by Statistics Canada found that in those 11 years that Canada was engaged in Afghanistan, the incidence of generalized anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder almost doubled in the Canadian Armed Forces. And among those forces who served in Afghanistan, 10% have been diagnosed with PTSD as of 2017. And who knows how many others are still hiding it. Canadian Invictus team co-captain Natasha Dupuis was diagnosed with PTSD after returning from an 8-month mission in Afghanistan in 2009.
Every day was a dangerous day. It was never safe in Afghanistan, even within our little forward observation base there, we were getting hit.
Rocket attacks.
So you're never really safe there.
Natasha's role as a gunner required her and her squadron to leave the relative safety of the main base every day, often encountering improvised explosive devices, those IEDs.
March of 2009.
Mm-hmm.
You were on patrol. What happened?
We were on a week-long operation. We had spent the night on the top of a hill, and that morning, as we took off from this position, the vehicle behind mine hit an IED.
Right behind you. They hit a buried bomb.
Yes, it was really bad. The Coyote flipped upside down. This was actually the worst scene I've seen, and I ended up being one of the first responder on this scene, and I remember going to find out the casualties and stuff, and finding a friend of mine dead on the scene, and from the obvious signs, I knew that the driver hadn't made it also. This was horrible. It was a horrible, horrible day that leaves scars.
Trooper Jack Boutier and Trooper Corey Hayes were killed in that blast.
And then as soon as the medical evacuation happened and they were lifting off, is that when you let go?
Yeah, I was having a big crying spell, and you just lose two friends, and seeing how they passed, like seeing the whole thing, and it was really horrifying. It was really hard to cope.
Officers, to our fallen comrades, salute!
And that struggle to cope with the horrors Natasha had witnessed
wouldn't stop in the days to come.
When I look back, I can see how I was actually losing my mind. I remember hallucinating going into this operation, and I had to go out the vehicle for personal reasons. And so I went out, and I was seeing Taliban running at me, and here I was with my C7, like...
And they weren't there?
There was nobody there.
Natasha's symptoms did not subside, but she somehow endured the last 2 months of her mission and then returned to Canada. But her psychological troubles followed her home. Chronic flashbacks, nightmares, panic attacks.
My brain always thinks it's in danger. That's what the doctor told me, because it's been in danger for so long and in survival mode for so long that it doesn't really understand that I'm not in danger anymore.
You were that overwhelmed. You were not functioning really in civilian life.
Not functionable at all. I remember being in my house and unable to actually feed my own self. This, to me, was a mountain. By this point, I was really negative, seeing no point in life anymore.
But all that would change. Her psychologist suggested that being more active might help her, and that she should start taking up running with the goal of taking part in the annual half-marathon military run called the Canada Army Run.
So I signed up, and this is where I realized that I was not alone.
You met other soldiers who were suffering with
Exactly.
PTSD?
Yeah, and that's really important. And then I met other friends that also were injured, some physically, some psychologically. And I was really inspired by some that were staying positive despite their injuries.
The more she trained and surrounded herself with other soldiers, the more Natasha's symptoms subsided.
When I was asked to join the Invictus Games, that was the extra push I really needed. To be asked to represent Canada on an international competition, to me, was like unbelievable. I never thought something like that would ever be possible.
She still suffers setbacks, but Natasha is happy again and able to get on with the rest of her life.
We have all lost, either physically or mentally, and we all have in common the same goals and objectives, that is to overcome our injuries and illness. So it's just a really positive setting for us to share our experiences and overcome together.
Heroes bound by courage.
It's an incredible story.
Share strength and determination.
We're all in it together.
When W5 continues.
It's harvest season in Canada's heartland. A bountiful crop signals a lot of hard work, patience, and luck is paying off, which are very much the same values being saluted not far away in Brandon, Manitoba, as the Invictus Spirit Flame arrives to a gathering of today's soldiers ready to be inspired by a fellow Patricia's Light Infantryman.
Thank you.
Retired Corporal Clarke.
In 2006, I was shot in the neck in Afghanistan. And it put me into a very dark place. I was grieving the loss of the use of my body. In 2009, I finally took the steps and got into wheelchair rugby. And what it has given back to me, there aren't any words for it. It returned a quality of life that you just can't understand. So what I want you guys to do for me is, if you know a brother in arms that's having a hard time, Let's help them out. Let's not leave them behind. Get them involved in sports. Even if it's taking them out for a jog, getting them out to play some basketball. These games are all inclusive. I want more guys on the team next year. You guys can do that for me, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I knew what happened on the tour, and the outlook didn't look so good for Chris. To see him now, mobile, participating in the Invictus Games, part of Team Canada, and his speech today was very inspiring to myself and I think my battalion.
It's an incredible story of perseverance and someone who has been able to move through, as he says, the most difficult days of his life and come out on the other end a stronger person. He's definitely a model of what we'd like to see for an injured soldier, and he's definitely an inspiration to other members.
You watch for me on the podium.
Oh,
sir.
we absolutely will. And if you need anything from the second, you let us know, all right?
I will, sir.
Right on. Second and on.
Take care.
Cheers.
30 minutes away, the Shiloh military base. Chris was just 21 years old when he first came here in 2004, a young private learning how to become a professional soldier before being deployed to Afghanistan.
This was a different lifetime for me. It always has a special spot in my heart, obviously. It's always going to be very important to me, but definitely feels weird.
That one there, we just got them a few months ago.
They gone out on X with them in Wainwright?
No, not yet, but they're going to be.
Any uneasiness he feels returning to where and when his body was whole fades fast as he encounters his old crew.
Do you remember Jay Froud?
How is he still a master corporal?
He's a sergeant.
He was a master corporal when we got it.
I know. He's been a sergeant for like 10 years.
I come back and now all the guys that were my rank are now running the show here, so it's a little crazy, right? Put you in charge, eh? Yeah. It has such a reminiscing feel where it brings you back and it's very nostalgic, but it's very positive. Everything has been extremely positive. It's helped my recovery because it never stops, right? Life is just one big recovery until we die.
And now, the final march. Only hours before the opening ceremonies of the Invictus Games.
We're number one.
And all 90 competitors for Team Canada are on board, heading to Toronto. The Invictus Spirit Flame, lit by a wounded Canadian veteran in Afghanistan, is, like the soldiers injured and lost in that fierce fight, finishing a journey in a city where everyday Canadians will stand and salute.
Welcome, Team Canada! Welcome!
This moment, these games, a big part of their ongoing healing. A chance to show themselves how much they're still capable of. To share the competitive spirit with their families and comrades.
I can tell you that we are gonna make Canada proud.
But maybe more importantly, a chance to show the rest of us, I am Invictus. I was wounded, but I am unconquered.
When at Invictus, I'll just be a guy. I'll just be a former soldier like the rest. We're all in it together.
I can see how it's helping a lot of my teammates, saying it's okay that you're disabled.
We all suffered from injury or illness, but it's about not giving up, taking the next challenge. I think to be able to represent Canada here at home, I think it's going to be incredible.
I've had many occasions to observe guys going through physical adversity, guys overcoming depression, overcoming PTSD, overcoming anxiety, overcoming, solitude, and just moving on and carrying on with activities that they enjoy and that they love, and using that as a step to move on to a better life, right? And that's what Invictus is all about. I think that message can profit everybody from all walks of life.